doesn't become your enemy. This sex doesn't become your enemy. It could have been your enemy, but because you follow the Sunnah of the Prophet, not only you defeat them, you turn them into your ally.
You end up recruiting the sexual desire as a means of attaining the hereafter.
The pleasure that is felt in sexual intercourse between a man and his wife is a little sign of the next worldly pleasure, by Imam Ghazali from Ihya Ulumuddin.
It's a lot more than just sex that you talk about. It's about family life, it's about civilization as a whole, it's about fitting this whole topic into law, into our adab, the way we act. All of this comes in, including spirituality.
Assalamualaikum, Brother Ma'ruf.
Walaikum salam, walaikum salam.
So welcome to our first podcast. In this podcast, we are going to discuss on chapter 1 of our book, Sexual and Islam, in conjunction with the Sticky Wickets Project with our friend from Bradford, Brother Ma'ruf. The purpose of this podcast is for the benefit of those who have not read the book. But if you want to join our Usra, the online Usra, because we will be discussing the chapter, we would like to give you like a summary of this chapter. So maybe we shall start with a little introduction on Sticky Wickets Project. Brother Maruf, what is it about, the Sticky Wickets Project?
It's actually evolved over time. I used to receive a lot of questions from youngsters about topics which Muslims have been aware of for centuries, which at times trouble us in the sense that we don't understand them deeply. When we don't understand something, obviously it becomes troubling to our mind and heart. But there are answers to these questions. And it's topics like apostasy, jihad, topics like this one, sex, the Islamic perspective on sex. And that's where I think our interests coincided and matched. But the Sticky Wickets Project aims to provide seminars, study circles on these issues so that youngsters can ask questions openly and not forever hide this in their heart, and get some answers which will give us some understanding in our hearts about the position that Islam takes on these issues.
So, why sticky wicket? What does that term mean, actually?
Sticky wicket. In cricket, when a bowler bowls out somebody cleanly, the wickets usually fall down. The sticky wickets usually stay standing. It's those issues that are still troubling the hearts of young people, and they need elaboration, clarification, understanding.
That we are actually honored and blessed that you want to come on board to discuss this topic with us, because I felt that on the one hand, the discussion of this topic is kind of taboo. On the other hand, it's still around, so that there is like this kind of dialectic, it's taboo, but yet it's still bothering a lot of people.
Sticky wicket.
That's why it's sticky wicket. That's so.
But I think a lot of the work which you're doing, the work has been done centuries ago. It's been covered up so well. Osman and Enon are now bringing out and adding the new understanding that we have from science and from psychology onto it as well, which is a brilliant addition to what was existing, and just telling people that, hello, this is something that we were discussing centuries ago. Why are we brushing this under the carpet? And I think the brushing under the carpet is causing a lot of problems, like it is with the other issues.
So maybe we go into it, starting with any questions that you have.
I mean, I think one of the most obvious questions, I think it strikes anybody, that title, look at that book there, Sex, Soul and Islam. I mean, why use the word sex? I mean, isn't that a bit offensive to Muslims? And why have you put sex and the soul and Islam? What's the link?
Whereas Islam is actually a creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sex is also a creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as much as Islam is, and as much as soul is. In fact, in the verse that we often use, وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ أَنْ خَلَقَ لَكُمْ مِنْ أَنفُسِكُمْ أَزْوَاجًا. So in that verse, Allah actually referred to sex as his ayat. So that sex that we are talking about is the sexual phenomena which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created. And the book is telling readers that that creation should not be demeaned, such that it cannot be discussed together with Islam and so on.
And I felt that the title really reflects our own view that there is this close holistic relationship between sex, soul, and Islam. Yeah. Because the other working title that we were thinking of was actually the sexual sunnah. But in fact, it doesn't reflect the content of the book, of how actually there is a link to your soul, your emotional, your holistic development as a Muslim. And this is guided at the very base of Islam as a foundation.
Are you saying, in effect, that sex could be spiritual as well?
Yes, of course.
And that is a topic which we discuss in that section called Sex as an Expression of Faith. There'll be a section that actually discusses what do we mean by being spiritual in the making.
I think one of the hadith you mention in there, if I can paraphrase it, is that where the Prophet said to the Sahaba that would you be rewarded if you give charity, and they said yes.
Sadaqah.
Sadaqah. So he almost equated sex, the sexual act, as a sadaqah, and then he said, if you did the sex act in a wrong way, would you be punished? And they said yes. So he said, if you do it in the right way, there's almost a reward attached to it. I mean, that is good. I mean, I've never seen the polar opposites between, the traditional view in the West, where the Victorian view of sex, it was just seen as a necessity and
necessary evil.
Necessary evil. Yeah, that's a good description. Whereas what you're the idea that you're trying to put across in your book is that it's not only is it a natural thing, it's something that is
it's not evil.
Not evil. It's
not evil, but sinful.
It depends on who does it, and how they do it.
Right.
That reminds me about your comment. It reminds me actually on YouTube we have comments. They were saying that this is shameful. And can you imagine rabbis and have you ever seen rabbis and pastors talking about this topic in public? So our answer to them is, we have not seen, because our view is not in line with pastors and rabbis. Your view is in line with pastors and rabbis. Our view is in line with the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. However, after saying that, I would also like to qualify that the necessary evil view in Christianity is rather medieval. I have seen discussions online of Christians actually trying to encourage the same kind of message that we have, actually trying to encourage fellow Christians to not see this as a necessary evil, actually. So they have already shifted from the medieval thinking. It is regretful if we Muslims don't keep up with our Prophet, whereas other people are actually going closer to what our Prophet is messaging, advocating.
So if you recall, in I think the preface of the book, we have this quotation: the pleasure that is felt in sexual intercourse between a man and his wife is a little sign of the next worldly pleasure, by Imam Ghazali from Ihya Ulumuddin.
Yeah, I mean that was a revelation.
How did you find when you see that?
Well, it just shows that our medieval view was that this is what he said, it was a foretaste of paradise. Paradise. So Ghazali was very advanced in this. In a way, we've regressed. The other question I have on this for yourselves is, aren't our carnal desires they're to do with the animal side of us, or somebody could accuse you of encouraging the animalistic side of us. Isn't religion supposed to be about higher ideals? And here we are talking about things which are to do with our animal self.
In what you asked, are you saying that when we talk about sex, we will inevitably promote promiscuity? Yeah, so that is a valid question, because these are the issue in any education. For example, people wonder whether when you talk about drug education to children, when you talk about safe sex education in children, are you going to promote? Teaching or talking about it doesn't promote it, because there are also values involved in it. And secondly, we are also telling them of the choice, and we will slant them into values that are upheld by the society. For example, when I teach drug education, we're telling why drug is not good and the negative consequence. So the same thing for sex education. And in our book, we actually talk about the sanctity of sex in Islam. Why is it a privilege? And we explain actually the rationale for the exclusive right of sex in a marriage relationship. So I felt that any teenagers, any adults who read the book will appreciate why Islam is against premarital sex and promiscuity. So the way we see it, sex is a basic instinct for human, and that is how God has created us. But we are also given guidance how to control, how to maneuver, how to ensure that the sex doesn't get out of control, and that the sexual relationship is enshrined in the constitution of marriage, so that it provides safety for the woman and for the children of the family that is born of the union. So that's how we presented it in the book.
This is actually not a modern view. It's not a liberal view, actually. This is actually the traditional view among Muslims. It's just that by this time, we have lost it. And then when we hear it again, we think that it is a modern view. There's one writer, our friend from UK, actually, Habib Akandi, has written this book, A Taste of Honey. And he has shown the history of people in the past, the traditional Muslims who were closer to the Prophet. They have a tradition of discussing and advocating, actually, men and women in becoming good lovers. Yeah. In his book, he also explained possibilities of what actually happened to us. And one of the theories that he proposed is actually colonization, actually. Through colonization, we have adopted the colonialist view of sex as a necessary evil and things like that.
That's interesting that colonialism could actually do that to us.
Yes, because our colonists are quite Buddhist. The Victorian idea of sexuality is like, you don't enjoy sex with your wife. It's just to produce children. If you want to enjoy sex, you have mistresses or go to the prostitute.
Just another question. What qualifies you two people? I mean, I know you're going to get this question. I mean, how dare you? Are you muftis? Are you? What qualifications do you have?
Yeah, very good question, Madam Mawi, and I think much needed for us to explain. This book started with my practice when I was doing counseling for couples. I got about 34 years experience of doing counseling. So in one stage of my work, I do counseling for Muslim couple. And in our earlier work as a speaker for marriage guidance course, we got the first book, which was called 20 Hearts, A Guide to Marriage. So this was written and published by the Muslim Converts Association of Singapore and MUIS, the Muslim Religious Council of Singapore. So it was vetted, it was approved. I felt that was a validation of our ability to present this topic in a way that is acceptable to the Muslim. So with that background, I felt I had that qualification to write the book about the couple relationship. So I think two things: my personal experience as a counselor, and also that our first book has been accepted by and endorsed by MUIS.
The question is, what rights have we got to talk from the Islamic point of view? We spoke from an Islamic point of view because we are Muslims, actually. If we were Buddhists, we would present this book from from a Buddhist point of view, not only do we have the right, we have the duty to discuss anything from the Islamic point of view. But I also agree there is a concern. It's a question of credibility, tawliya, ijazah, and we have decided to do it because we feel that if we were to wait for the completely qualified Muslim teachers who can handle not only the Islamic point of view, but also the sexual science point of view and the relationship point of view, these three aspects, I think it's not going to happen in our lifetime. So while we are still here and are doing this work and we are doing the counseling, we are actually seeing Muslims who misuse the teachings of Islam to get away with what they're not supposed to get away, well, because of certain hadiths that they use, which is actually discussed in chapter 2 of the book. So because we feel that this has to be addressed, so that's why we take it upon ourselves to write it. Those who are out to cancel us, to dismiss us, I really have nothing to say, because if they want to dismiss us, they will dismiss us no matter what I say. But there are people who want to read the book, but they are also concerned about credibility, which I also believe in it, because I am also a traditionalist. So for these people, we are suggesting Suratul Hujurat ayat number 6. Ya ayyuhalladina amanu in ja'akum fasiqun binaba'in fatabayyanu. So in that ayat, Allah says, all those who believe, meaning you, if a fasiq means a wrongdoer. So in this case, you can consider us as a fasiq. If a fasiq come to you with information, so this book, you can't take this book as knowledge because you're not qualified. Okay, so it applies to us. So if a fasiq comes to you with knowledge, he said fatabayanu. Fatabayanu does not mean go and check their paper qualification. It does not mean go and check their teachers, whether they have sasilatul ilm all the way to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allah didn't say that. Allah didn't even say check his universities, you know, what imams he studied, degrees, so on and so forth. Allah said, check their evidence. So this book is heavily footnoted. Okay? And so when we read this book, we are not presenting our views from an Islamic teacher point of view, but rather we are more like a compiler of ideas, and we present it to you with evidence.
I mean, this is a long-standing debate within Muslim circles, isn't it?
Right.
Who speaks for Islam? And traditionally, it's always been the ulama who's spoken for Islam. But I think we're entering an era, I call it the democratization of knowledge. We should check people's argument out and discuss openly. I mean, your book is open to critique, just like any other book is. I just happen to believe that it's very well written. And one thing I actually discovered, it's a lot more than just sex that you talk about. It's about family life. It's about civilization as a whole. It's about fitting this whole topic into law, into our adab, the way we act, including spirituality. And I think people who don't read the book, they're just missing out. They're cancelling you for reasons which they need to address within their own souls.
But I would like to make a qualification. The reason why I wrote it is not because I believe in the democratization of knowledge, but rather I cannot find a traditionally approved scholar who can handle these three components. That is the only reason. Hopefully, in the end, what we hope is that if we all can contribute towards making sex becoming a comfortable topic to have discourse in, hopefully, in the end, the traditional teachers will actually go into this topic, and you won't be needing people like me anymore. You know, that is where I'm coming from, actually.
I beg to differ. I think we'll need people like you for a long, long time to come. Let's get into the book itself. How did you go about organizing the overall message of this book?
Basically, the message is in 3 sections, which is in line with our aqidah, our sharia, and our akhlaq. So what we're trying to do is show that the sexual phenomena plays a significant part in our aqidah, our sharia and also in our akhlaq. So, however, we break it into four. Chapter 1 is about the aqidah, 2 and 3 is about the sharia, and 4 is about our akhlaq. So in chapter 1, we talk about where sex come into play in our aqidah. And in short, what we find through our study is that sex is used by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not only the obvious way is actually procreation, that everybody knows, but Allah also used the same thing which He used to provide us with vessels for souls to reside in. The same phenomena that He created, or it's also used by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to create the environments in which the souls are to be nurtured. And this is the story behind the creation of love and mawaddah wa rahmah, love and mercy that is to be established by the couple, which leads to nurturing family, which leads to their standard family, which leads to tribes and also peoples and nations, so on and so forth, who believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it begins with that starting block, which is Sakinah Mawaddah wa Rahmah. And this is the gist of chapter 1. And along the way, we will discuss peripheral issues like how is it spiritual, what is the nature of the family, and what is the nature of the tribe, so on and so forth. But basically, that's the gist of chapter 1. So chapter 2 is about Sharia. The Sharia is meant to achieve the goal of regulative mercy. We start with an analysis based on our experience, our counseling experience, from sociological studies by Muslim sociologists as well as non-Muslim sociologists, which shows that actually much of our history and also our current affairs, we are not achieving the Quranic ideal of tranquility, love and mercy. And so in chapter 2, we propose our analysis of why it is not happening. So when we do the podcast on chapter 2, we will elaborate that. Chapter 3 is also on the Sharia. So we go into the traditional hukum, the do's and don'ts, whether it is haram, so on and so forth. And then we bring in the new sexual shenanigans that people are doing nowadays, like BDSM,
all sex, and sex, sex toys,
and role play and things like that. And how this stack up against our traditional fiqh. So that is chapter 2 and 3, which is the second aspect of the book, which is addressing the Sharia. The fourth chapter, which is the third section of the book, is about the akhlaq. Chapter 1 is about the ideal. Number 2 is where we went wrong. Fourth chapter, which is the third section of the book, is to remind Muslims how the Prophet wanted us to achieve that Quranic ideal. So when we go into that podcast, we will go into detail. So basically, that's how the book was organized.
I'm getting a general idea that chapter 1 is about the journey of the soul through this life, that sex actually plays a really important part in that journey. Could you elaborate a bit on that? Because I think you spend a lot of time in chapter 1 on that.
I think it's linked to our earlier book, Tranquil Hearts, where our main thesis is that marriage is a vehicle that helps us to improve our iman, amal, and ihsan. And through marriage, you have a partner not only in terms of social, emotional, but also the spiritual journey together.
So I think, where it says, it's there in the Quran that where Allah describes us as libas, as in she is a cover for me and I am a cover for her, meaning we protect each other from sin.
Right.
As well as we protect ourselves from many other things as well. For me, that made sense because you do mention the law in there as well. And that law is applicable on this earth,
right,
and in our hereafter. And the soul's journey, we're all going back home. We want to go back home to the nice place.
Yes.
Yeah. And the way I see it, and I get it from your book, is that we are a protection for each other as well.
So when you mention the law is only one aspect. it cannot be achieved with the law only. And the law, the law has to be stern, more as a deterrent actually. But on top of that, there are also other aspects like day-to-day code of behavior, which we discussed at length, the concept of hijab. Part of this system, which is contributing towards the culture of purity, is marriage. So marriage is part and parcel of this system, because marriage provide the ideal.
You know, this is a question we get quite often from young people. You know, like in Western culture, you have many girlfriends, boyfriends, relationships until you finally decide to settle down with the one. Why do we have to find the one first and forego all of those experiences?
So they felt that having more partners, having a lot of experiences will help them be more stable when they eventually settle down, whether it's within or outside marriage. But in reality, we don't see the divorces in Western society going down. We don't see those who are promiscuous, those who have friends with benefit, those who have what they call situationship, being any happier with their sexual relationship with the partners that they found. It points down to the fact that in order to have a satisfying sexual relationship, you need to have stability, security in that relationship. Marriage provides that. Nothing else provides that, because marriage is a social contract. You know each other's expectation. You know that you're going to be exclusive, and you know that this is a safe space to be who you are. You can show your fear, your insecurity, your trauma with your partner, knowing that he or she will be there because we are a team as a married couple. With this kind of emotional and social relationship that is very stable, then the sexual relationship just adds on to it. But you do have people who have long-term relationship, they're not married, and they're perfectly happy. That, I would think, is an exception rather than a norm. Then, on the other hand, if Islam has such a perfect idea about marriage, why do we have divorces? Because marriages do fail in Islam. And the response to this is when people in marriage do not understand and practice marriage the way is taught by Islam. What I see happening between husband and wife is that each one are fighting for their rights instead of the responsibility. So husband said, I'm a husband, you obey me, you must do this for me, and then not knowing that if they had carried out the responsibility and the wife also carried out the responsibility, both will fulfill each other's need. But people are fighting for their rights. So this is the imbalance that create a lot of marital dispute and unhappiness. So
this is the same phenomena that is happening in the community, that we are too legally minded.
Yes.
In the end, we end up being lawyers in the bedroom.
Yeah, I get you.
Yeah. Lawyers in the bedroom.
My rights and your rights.
My rights and your rights.
Yeah.
Well, when it comes to this friends with benefits and so on, I've heard of rumblings of muta making a comeback. Temporary contracts. I'll be with you for 3 months, 6 months. Whereas what you seem to be suggesting in your book, for the human being to benefit from this contract, it has to be long term.
Yeah.
I mean, any comment on that, where Muslims are trying their own schemes to get this temporariness?
Yeah.
How I think it long term, this temporariness has no benefit at all.
Yeah. So you have given the answer in your question.
Yeah.
But
I want you to comment on it.
Yeah. So the point that I would like to raise up is this, that Muslims today have this tendency of focusing on the fiqh. So that's why in our book, we start with the aqidah, the fiqh, the sharia, and the akhlaq. So if you just focus on the fiqh only, you actually will miss the aqidah. And so you in your question, you have already mentioned the aqidah is about creating that long-term tranquility, love, and mercy. So
Yeah.
if your fiqh, if your sharia is not achieving that there's something wrong with your understanding, with your reading of the sharia.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, temporary marriage there was a reason why it was allowed at that time, right?
Yeah.
It's a fiqh point of view. Yeah.
So like you say, this is not about fatwa. So I'm not giving a fatwa, but I'm giving something for you to think about. Do we want to continue just looking at Sharia only and then missing the aqidah? And we haven't talked about the akhlaq. Because the akhlaq is actually about developing that relationship. Can you develop a relationship within 3 weeks?
3 months.
Within
Short
3
term.
weeks or 3 months, some of them are doing
Right.
3 days.
Yeah.
Actually, we have seen a program, YouTube program,
Abuse
where this
actually.
is actually being done,
And it's abused actually.
abused by
Religious people.
basically in the end, this demon, because it's temporary, they will lose their virginity, and then they will not get a good future, because in those society, when you lose your virginity, it's at the end of your life as a woman. The worst thing is that because of this, because they don't have any value anymore, these imams are using them for prostitution actually, because it's continual mut'ah.
Yeah.
Continual mut'ah. Now, I'm not saying that the mut'ah is wrong. I'm not in a position to say it's wrong. But I am saying that you should not just be practicing your sharia without looking at the aqidah and the akhlaq. That's all I'm saying.
You know, this, I mean, it's a brilliant use of the term aqidah meaning your beliefs about marriage and sex and so on.
Purpose of marriage.
I would posit another word, Maqasid al-Sharia.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, you know, what are the Maqasid behind the rulings? And I think that, again, I agree with you that the Maqasid of all of what we read in the Quran is long-term sustainability to build a civilization, to build families, to build a culture, to build us as human souls and human bodies and human beings over the long term. And it can only be done over the long term. So, I mean, that's just an addition. Maqasid was the original intent of Allah about these things. And from my understanding, I think the maqasid of all of these verses and all of these teachings is to long-term sustainability of human civilization. And we can't do it otherwise. Let's elaborate on these things. The concept of hijab. What are our limits? You know, the interaction between different genders, even when you're married, because I think that applies more when you're married, because basically all the zero tolerance for sex outside of these bounds.
But we discussed about the hijab concept.
Why it's important?
Why it's important, because we see this in counseling actually, because most of at least the cases that we meet, they don't start from wanting to
have a past. Like Osman said, a past doesn't start when you look at this girl and say, oh, I want to have sex with her. It always start with the mutual sharing and bonding emotionally, especially if one party has problem and both have common problem. And as you share, there's an emotional bonding, and you feel close, you feel this person understand you. And that emotional bonding then and it will lead to you wanting to meet each other more often. You go for lunch, you know, first thing you do when you wake up, you text a person, how are you, how's your day, you know, and this kind of interaction then will lead to that desire to be close more than emotionally or socially. Yeah. So right now, my advice to people, affairs doesn't start when you go out on a date or book a hotel room with the person. Affairs starts when you delete messages to this person. Because it means in case your child, your children, or your wife sees your handphone. So affairs start when you start deleting things because you don't want your wives or your family to find out you've been talking to this person. You'll be saying things, how are you, how's your day, blah, blah, blah. So this is the standard now. When people start deleting, then they must check themselves, why am I doing this? if you feel that you're emotionally close and connected to somebody else other than your spouse, it's really a red flag for you to go back to your partner.
In that discussion, we also remind readers not to be like fanatic about it, because sometimes we need to look at the situation.
Just to come in there, I think you've just mentioned a very important point there, and you mention it in your book, that you have societies of both extremes. Those who are extremely liberal and don't mind any interaction, and those who they want to separate men and women, don't even see each other. Women don't exist in some societies. Could you elaborate on that?
This one, I read it from this book called Sexuality in Islam by sociology professor Abdul Wahab Butiba, where he actually discussed his experiences in his Arab society, where because they are so segregated, in the end, because of this deprivation, they actually go into prostitution and homosexuality. It is more of a situational homosexuality rather than the ingrained sexuality. That is in his time, 1980s. I think now they are going into pornography full time. That is another irony. When you try to segregate, in the end, it actually becomes
counterproductive. Sometimes in the family setup, the chances of abuse from a male to a female family member will be quite high because of the exposure to pornography. So I'm seeing, and in Singapore, so recently we have many newspaper news about brothers as like 12 years old abusing the sister when she was 5 years old. I'm not sure that whether this happened in your community.
Absolutely. It's, again, these are things which are brushed under the carpet. The reality is that these things are happening. We had a case in Bradford, which was very unfortunate, between father and daughter. When she was on her deathbed, she admitted it, and she said she had been abused by her father, and she wanted to repent in front of Allah before she passed away. And it became a big story in the media as well. So these things happen. These things, there's always abuse within families as well.
If you come to know and are familiar with the sexual issue and don't see it as a taboo to talk about sex to the children, then children can be they can have a better sex education from young.
Yeah.
Because you're abused when you're young. But if the communities are even willing to talk about it, it's taboo, don't talk about it. Then the abuse will continue because the topic is seen as taboo.
Another concept which you are elaborating in chapter 1 is the concept of mind, body, and soul. Would you like to elaborate on that for us?
We discussed mind, body, and soul because it is linked to that culture of sexual purity. Why is that culture needed? Actually, because in the end, it is about the nurturing of the soul, right? So why is that culture needed? So in order to explain that, we actually go into the concept of mind, body, and soul. We feel that we needed to bring in some explanation because in our daily conversation, we always say mind, body, and soul. So maybe some Muslims may be wondering, is it really an Islamic point of view? So the concept of the ruh is actually from the verse 15, ayat 29. In that verse, actually, Allah mentioned that the ruh is blown into the man, and the word that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala used in that verse is, he used the word bashar, which in Arabic is more referring to the human animal. So the human animal was created, and then he blew the ruh into the mind. We understand the mind from verses like Surah Al-Baqarah, around ayat number 30, I think around there. Those stories illustrate that we actually are given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the mental capacity, the intellectual capacity higher than the angels. We know this ayat that we were once brought to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to witness him. So the verse in the Quran that talk about this does not refer to the ruh. It is not the ruh that was brought in front of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. Actually, it is the nafs. The Arabic word is anfus, which is the plural of the word nafs. So the nafs is referring to the complete concoction, which comprises of the mind, body, and soul. So these three we refer to when we talk about insan, man, comprising of mind, body, and soul. Part of the body is actually the sexual instinct, and the sexual instinct, together with the other parts of our body, like the desire for food, the desire for power, so on and so forth, has a tendency to tie us to this world, whereas the soul needs to go to the hereafter. So the body is only 1/3 of the contraction, and the sex is only part of this body. So it is a subset of insan, but it is so strong that it can actually, if you leave it alone, if you do not rely on guidance, it can actually lead us astray. So because of that, we need a very strong culture to help us against the temptation of the body. The point that we are making in the book is, if you follow the Sunnah of the Prophet, not only do you defeat your body, but you turn them to become your ally. This sex doesn't become your enemy. It could have been your enemy, but because you follow the Sunnah of the Prophet, the best way of defeat is actually to turn them into your ally. So that's our point actually in the book.
Yeah, so I think I was just going to mention that is one of the main points that comes through in the book, that you end up recruiting. You recruit the sexual desire as a means of attaining the hereafter. And it's very interesting that you said, you mentioned something earlier, and I meant to ask you to elaborate on it. What you've mentioned, that sex is only a small part of the overall human being, but it's so powerful. What are those different parts of us where there's that conflict inside us? Is the soul torn between different states? And it's going to its final home, and it's got to control this body in some way. Could you elaborate just a bit more on that, the different states of the soul?
Actually, I don't like to use the word soul, because the word soul usually means ruh. And the ruh is actually one of the three components. These tendencies that you're talking about is actually talking about the nafs.
Okay.
The nafs actually comprises of the mind, body, and soul. The nafs have, mentioned in the Quran, there is such a thing as the nafsul amaratu bisu, meaning the self which is inclined towards this world, towards bad. And then there is nafsul lawama, the reproaching self. That naturally remind you to do good. It is not that we have two elements in our body, but I think it is the same self, but this self has polarities. It can, like a battery, I think it's like, it can be negative, it can be positive. The negative one is nafs amaratu bisu, and the positive one is nafsul lawama. And we actually have the ability, rather, to control our self, our nafs, to go this way. So in order to do that, we need to employ our mind, and then our ability to comprehend is not only the mind. There are also intersections, the heart, and then we have intuition, firasat, and then we have khayal. So the successful nafs is the nafs that can balance between these two polarities. And this nafs is called the nafsul mutmainnah in one of the verses of the Quran. And we are not talking about the nafsul lawama defeating nafsul amara, because the nafsul amara, like the sexual instinct, is needed. It's needed to perpetuate. The nafsul to eat is also needed for survival, so on and so forth. So it is actually about balance. And the successful nafs is the one that can balance between these two polarities, and it is called nafsul mutmainnah. And in one of the verse of the Quran, Allah declared that the one that enters paradise is this nafsul mutmainnah.
I think the description in the Quran is a soul well pleased with God, Allah well pleased with it. And it's a beautiful, beautiful description where both, we were talking about love between human beings, but that is a love between creator and created, that it's going back to its creator with that love between the two. So as a way of a summary, you give us a summary of what some takeaways, Enon and Osman.
I think my take of chapter 1 is that it's actually quite conceptual and provide a macro framework to set the backdrop for the subsequent chapter. And some people may not find it easy reading because of it's very systemic and almost sociological. So I guess if you are not comfortable with chapter 1, you can go to the other chapters. It doesn't matter. There's no sequence to reading the book.
So we hope this is enough for you to have some idea of the concept of sex in our aqidah. Hopefully this podcast can become a starting point, because the whole idea behind the online Usra for sexual wellness is not another lecture. It will be an opportunity for us to hear from you, actually. Where you can ask questions and you can express your disagreement, actually, or your own observation. Because we think that it is quite a difficult opportunity for young people, especially, to discuss this topic responsibly.
I mean, this has been absolutely amazing, mind-blowing for me. Mind-blowing reading your book. And, mind-blowing taking part in this discussion. Thank you for giving us the time. Again, I would stress that people take the time to read your book. I do understand people's fears on this as well. We've ended up in a very sexualized society, and I think people are scared that looking at the title, looking at the book. But after reading chapter 1 especially, I had a very different view of the book. The book is not just about sex. It's about Islam's teachings, Islam's view on building civilization, Islam's view on building a healthy society, and what part then sex has to play in that. It brings aspects of sociology into it as well, and psychology, and it's a brilliant effort from both of you. So thank you for your time, for your efforts, and inshallah we can grow this project as we move on into the future.
All right, and thank you. Bye. Assalamualaikum.
Salam.